with single leg work, one of the most important things that you can keep in mind is that the foot will sometimes determine recruitment up and down the plant leg or the stance leg. So, as I mentioned in the past, the tripod foot is what we're really looking to emphasize in our big lifts, our squats and our deadlifts. So that's kind of the base of your big toe, your first metatarsal, and then the base of your fifth toe, or your fifth metatarsal, and then your heel, or your calcaneus. That forms a nice tripod. And so if we push through that tripod, we're essentially pushing through the midfoot for our force production. However, in the case of single leg work, you can slightly modify this and either recruit more quads or more glutes and hamstrings. So, in the case of something like a split squat, here, normally when you teach someone a split squat, you might block the shin with a bench or with a wall or something like that and teach them to stay completely vertical and upright. Or, once they're to this point where they can complete the split squat without any sort of deviation, they understand how to come up and down without any forward or backward movement during the movement. Now, the little tweak that you can make is simply altering knee position slightly. Just like in a squat, if you're only sitting back into the hips and not allowing the knees to travel forward, as in the case of a low bar squat, then you're going to get more hip dominant movement. It's kind of semantics a little bit, as there is no quad dominant or hip dominant for the most part, but in the case of a split squat then, instead of just being directly vertical, here we can allow the knee to travel forward, as long as there's no knee pain obviously, but we can allow that knee to travel a little bit farther forward, and then drive through the ball of the foot, and you'll feel that quad kick in a little bit more. Similarly, if we just think about sitting back into the hip, so if my bottom position looks more like this, instead of like this, so I've just simply shifted back into the hip, now I'm going to get more glute, and if I try and drive through the heel as opposed to the ball of my foot, I'm going to get more hamstring. You can take that same thing, and now you're going to modify it a little bit and improve the difficulty. A single leg squat off a bench. And what I mean is that you would simply start on a bench, single leg squat, just like that. First little tweak is simply as you touch down, just allow the heel to touch and not the ball of the foot. You'll notice in that first rep, I kind of pushed off a little bit with this free leg as opposed to only keeping the tension on this plant leg. So the easiest way to rectify that is simply put all of your weight on the plant leg and only allow the heel to touch down on this leg. And you'll feel it increases the difficulty. The next little tweak is simply, like I talked about with the tripod foot earlier, is just alter that tripod. So, if you want to mainly drive through the quad and not use as much of the glute and the hamstring, you can slide a little bit of the heel off the back edge of the pad. Again, I'd only recommend this after you're fairly experienced with these and you've been doing them for a while. There's an element of a balance aspect in this, given that you're working with a softer pad and not a hard surface. If you do them off a box, that would be different, but if you have access to a bench, it's going to change the dynamics of the movement. So if you shift a little bit of that heel off the pad and then focus on that big toe and the ball of the foot, then when you're going to drive off, you'll notice more of that weight is shifted forward, just like in the split squat, and we'll get more out of the quad. Similarly, if you just reverse the ideology, you can take the toes off the front of it, and now you're forced to sit back into the hip and drive up through the heel. So, little tweak, but altering foot position on something like this, or even altering joint mechanics in terms of how far forward the knee goes over the toes, provided there's no pain, can then help the lifter lifter to understand kinesthetically, oh, well, if I'm in this position, I'll probably feel more quads, or if I'm in this position, I might feel more glutes. Now, if you don't like the split squat or the single leg squat from a bench, that's fine. Both of those are excellent options, and I would recommend them. But if you're doing something like a single leg leg press, you can apply the same concept by simply just focusing and using your intent on where you're actually driving for the foot. So simply find those 3 points of contact, that tripod foot, first and fifth metatarsal, and the heel. And then, if you're trying to activate a little bit more quad, simply keep the legs lower, so now you allow the knees to travel a little bit farther over the toes. And then as you're going to drive, focus on driving through the ball of the foot. Similarly, if you want to hit the glutes and the hamstrings, put the leg a little bit higher, and then focus mainly on driving through the heel. Keep the weight off, or more, not entirely off, but more distributed towards the heel, and a little bit less off the ball of the foot. And I think you'll find that that activates the glutes and the hamstrings a little bit more. So, try it out. A couple of quick tips there, but alter the foot position, and I think you'll see that it makes things a heck of a lot more difficult.